Hi everyone. You will surely agree that science is simply an incredible thing. Even 50 years ago, we couldn't even imagine that we'll have access to any library in the world from our own home, take pictures on our phone, use contact lenses and talk to the refrigerator, and medicine will reach such heights that doctors will learn to transplant even the heart. But progress doesn't stop here, and today surgeons are seriously having big ideas about transplantation of the most difficult part of the human body, the head. Yes, we're talking about a possible transplantation of not a separate organ like the kidney, but of an entire system, with the brain in the lead. You should agree it sounds too fantastic, but it's true. Don't you believe in it? Then today we'll try to figure out what'll happen when transplanting the head. Let's get it on. A few decades ago, the tissue's movement from one organism to another was considered something incredible, but today surgeons can transplant the liver, kidneys, heart, and even hands and feet. Moreover, millions of people have already dared to take such a step and successfully live with other people's organs as if they're their own. However, no one had the guts to connect the human head with another body until recently. Except, well, we'll talk about this a little later. The main problem with a head transplant isn't only in the body's ability to reject any foreign objects, but also in the spinal cord. It's then directly connected to another brain located in our cranium and is responsible for transmitting all the necessary signals to other parts of the body. If you damage the spinal cord, and it will surely be damaged during such an operation, the person won't be able to feel anything but the face, and definitely couldn't control their new body. But this is precisely the whole point of such operations, to help those whose body, let's say, has become unusable and needs a complete replacement. For example, that happens with muscular atrophy. Yes, we're talking about the very disease of Stephen Hawking. But mankind has already been moving in this direction for a long time and has already achieved some results. Dog. In fact, the first serious head transplant operations have been performed, however, without the participation of human donors. There were a few operations actually, and they involved as many as 20 dogs, most of which were ordinary mongrels. Back in 1954, the Soviet physician Vladimir Demikov planted these four-legged experimenters each an additional head. Yes, it sounds very strange and even pretty creepy, but it isn't some horror film like Frankenstein or something, but a real historical fact. Two-headed dogs could even eat and were fully aware of what was happening around them. The most persistent pattern lived for about a month. During this time, both parts of the animal even managed to grow up a bit. Well, at least their hair grew a couple of centimeters. It's interesting that Demikov wasn't even a doctor and he had to work in terrible conditions, hiding in the cellars, and the experiments were more like attempts to create Cerberus. Well, you know, this three-headed ancient Greek dog. But even so, experiments with transplantation of canine heads seriously advanced the science called transplantology and helped the development of medicine. In fact, the first heart transplant was carried out by Demikov's pupil and was based on his dog experiments. After all, these Soviet scientists not only joined some dogs to others in an arbitrary order, but also transplanted their organs, achieving really impressive results. Monkey. 16 years after experimenting with the creation of two-headed dogs, an American scientist named Robert White conducted a number of unique operations at the Brain Research Center in Cleveland. But he didn't stop only by studying the main human organ, of course. Otherwise, why would we mention this, right? Eventually, after numerous experiments, White decided on the unique head transplantation from one monkey to another. The event took several hours of hard work of the doctor and his assistants and was quite successful. Well, how could such an operation have been successful at that time? The monkey survived and, awakened from anesthesia, was fully aware that the cunning scientist during the sleep had replaced her body. In any case, it was pretty viciously watching people and clicking its teeth. Unfortunately, the complications after the operation didn't allow to terminate the experiment properly, or at least to conduct a long observation. The monkey lived only a day and a half. Dr. White hoped that the public would be pleased with his experiments and the results obtained, but as it often happens, he was mistaken. The people were frightened and shocked. However, they didn't clutch the pitchfork, and the scientist was able to continue his studies with the devoted supporters. He even planned to someday bring the transplant experience to a new level, but he couldn't get enough financial support. Human. Of course, all these conversations and numerous experiments involving poor animals couldn't have ended with something other than a head transplant to a person. Well, no one has ever tried such experiments, but recently in 2015, an Italian neurosurgeon named Sergio Canavero said that he's going to perform an operation of head transplant from one person to another already in 2017. Yes, you got it absolutely right. It's no wonder that such news blew up the entire scientific world and even affected people who don't have anything to do with science and medicine. Canavero was laughed at, accused of lacking medical ethics and in a whole heap of other sins, but condemnation and skepticism didn't stop the scientists from finding thousands of supporters from all over the world. First, Canavero co-wrote scientists from South Korea and the US, who published a series of articles in the Surgical Neurology International magazine on a special substance, which in their opinion can help restore the spinal cord during the operation. As we've already said, the main difficulty during the transplantation of the head is the damage to this particular organ. Science has learned to fasten broken bones and most likely will soon be able to even grow them in some jars for future transplantations, but it doesn't do that great with the restoration of neural connections. Nevertheless, a team of stubborn scientists conducted an experiment on 8 paralyzed laboratory mice. They gave them this unique substance to see what would come of it, and the following happened. 3 of the 8 rodents couldn't survive, but the other 5 gradually restored their ability to move. After some time, the scientists repeated the experiment, leveling the magic substance up. Then, unforeseen circumstances intervened in the development of science. The laboratory was suddenly flooded and almost all the tailed test subjects perished. The only surviving rat gradually regained control of its body, and after 2 weeks was even able to eat, and then perhaps it decided to take over the world. What are we? Oh, yes. After the rat scientists decided to switch to larger animals and repeated their experiment on the dog, don't worry, this time there were no extra heads and other horrors. Polyethylene glycol was simply injected into the spine of a puppy. The 90% of its spinal cord was damaged. As a result of the experiment, after 3 days the dog was able to move its paws. In 2 weeks it was able to crawl, and after 3 weeks it did start walking. Of course, there was a lot of criticism. In general, the opponents of the experiments talked about insufficient control and suspicious lack of evidence. Scientists justified that the experiments were preliminary, and in the future they'd be held repeatedly with observance of everything. Well, you know, everything that must be observed in such situations. They say that in the process of preparing for the most important operation, Sergio Canavero had time to experiment with the monkey. However, after the transplantation of the head, the spinal cord of the monkey was still damaged, and its brain had to be cooled to 15 degrees to prevent cell death. The experiment wasn't the most successful. The monkey lived only 20 hours, but even this failure didn't stop an Italian scientist. Yep, it's right. He's really going to carry out a transplant of the human head. He even made an arrangement with a company of specialists who would conduct the operation. It really seems a little strange to us that Canavero is only ready to assist the doctors, but perhaps it's all about his specialization. According to the neurosurgeon, the first such operation would be carried out in China this December, with the full approval of the Chinese authorities. They even agreed to finance the entire costly process, provided that the PRC citizen becomes a donor. Well, let's go back to the most important question. What will happen if you transplant a person's head? Scientists don't give any firm answer. They say that it must be an incredibly complex operation that will allow the world's scientists not just to step forward, but literally jump in 2 steps. The cost of this procedure is estimated at $20 million, and it'll take more than 150 doctors, nurses, technical specialists to conduct it, and of course they'll need special materials and equipment. If everything goes well, a lucky person with a new body will need a long rehabilitation and could move independently only after a year. But this can't be compared to the opportunity to live a full life again. Some skeptical doctors claim that the chances of success of such an operation in the next decade are very small, because you need to take into account a large number of different factors and cool the brain to such a state after which it can hardly work. And we sure don't talk about all sorts of ethical standards. But who knows, maybe in a couple of years humanity will fly to Mars, explore the ocean, and at the same time conduct the most complex operation, which one could only dream of now.
If you haven't checked Jelly Gummy Bear's channel yet, you should do it right away. You'll certainly like all the funny experiments with the jelly bear. Cool life hacks, awesome homemade stuff, and exciting adventures that are waiting for you on the channel.
Thanks for watching.
Please like and share the video in social networks, and we'll be right back to you as fast as we can.